Many of the platforms out there, they tend to be compliance led. I'm interested in intelligence. I want to know where to focus. I want to know exactly what to do to move the needle. The end goal of Nexus is to understand where is our point of highest risk at any given moment of the day, of the week, of the year, in which we need to focus our efforts to make sure that nobody gets hurt in that location.
So, Chris, welcome to My Safety Tech podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, cool. Tell me about Nexus.
So Nexus is a SaaS health and safety EHS software platform that is designed for principal contractors or general contractors in the US under CDM. So it doesn't necessarily replace anything that we have to do. It just streamlines and makes the overall process of managing construction projects so much more simpler. CDM projects are this mixture of so many different organizations being clumped together in this small footprint, and the principal contractor has the obligation to coordinate and manage all activities from the perspective of health and safety, and it's very challenging to do. Yeah, Nexus just supports those efforts. It just streamlines all of those processes, brings all the information together, and allows principal contractors to manage in a more effective manner.
Okay, so what was the thing that triggered you to go, actually, there's nothing out there that meets the requirement for this? I'm going to start down this journey of trying to build something.
I would say that, to be honest, it came from a pretty selfish place. So, as I mentioned, I manage anywhere between sort of 15 and 20 projects globally at any one time. And I didn't really have clear visibility of what was going on or actually happening in real time. I was receiving monthly reports, etc. But in construction, it's so dynamic; it changes minute by minute. So receiving reports at the end of each month, and then by the time you have time to analyze them, you don't really have the ability to actually make any change or to be reactive in real time. And that became a big problem for me. So what I tried to do is I went to the industry, to many of the tier one providers, and I said, listen, I have this problem. Please help me solve it. And while they all presented me their platforms and some of them had useful features, they were so generic because they've tried to be something to everybody. And when you try to be something for everybody, you dilute the ability to satisfy many clients. And, from myself, I just could not justify utilizing any of them because, again, they had one or two modules that were perhaps useful to a certain point. But what I also felt is that a lot of these providers, they want to integrate into every single aspect of your business. They want to be really deeply embedded. And what we didn't want, or what we were more precisely looking for, was something that we can just attach to that singular project for that space of time, and then we can walk away. So that it's kind of, the product needs to serve that particular need and not be embedded into the entire organization. And of course, specific to construction. And I found nothing. So naively, I said, okay, how hard could it be? Let's create something ourselves. So I went to a software development company and I invested, I think it was £20,000 at the time. And at the end, we got this scrappy, pretty poorly looking, but functional program that was allowing us to capture this data. And it allowed us to see things in real time. It allowed us to react in real time. And we saw a real positive return on investment. And from there, it kind of just spiraled. And I said, okay, if this is useful to us and to somebody in my position, then surely this is useful to the rest of the construction industry. And it spiraled from there. Then we started, redesigning from a UI UX perspective. We started adding new features, and we were just getting constant feedback because I'm in the loop. I'm part of, we create a module, we implement it, the next day we utilize it. And then after a month of utilization, we say, okay, we know what works, we know what doesn't. We change, we modify, we adapt. And over the past 4 years of constantly designing, implementing, validating, and then improving, we've ended up with this incredible product that actually would be incredibly useful to anybody managing construction projects around the world. And yeah, now we just said, okay, let's maybe be a little bit less selfish and make it available to the rest of the world.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I want to go back in time a little bit on this and I want to dive into it. So we've got a construction project. It's going on for a period of time. And then we've obviously got the client, the principal contractor, and contractors. Each of those are going to be big companies, right? They've all got their own software. But the problem is, it's a bit like, well, which bit are you going to use? And actually, we don't need something embedded into the whole organization. We just want something that's specific to this project that everybody on this one project can use. So
Yep.
we're not trying to launch some massive enterprise deal to go into this huge construction company and trying to infiltrate every single one of their construction projects. We just know that we've got this one project and every project is unique because they've got JVs in place. You've got multitudes of different structures of contractors that have now all got to work out how to work together. Every construction project is unique, right? It's very hard to duplicate and get exactly the same contractors, subcontractors. And then you've gone into that situation as client or principal contractor,
Principal contractor.
as principal contractor. And then you've gone, this is the software that everybody on that project needs to use. And this is that primary, almost communication tool, isn't it? I guess it's that tool where everything comes in and it's there for everybody to see in terms of makes everything visible.
Absolutely. But I mean, we have several features within Nexus. So it's not just, data collection. We also have, permit to work systems built into Nexus. We have a temporary work system built into Nexus. We have so many features that just improves the overall day-to-day management of health and safety within those projects. So absolutely, it collates, it tidies up all those documents, it centralizes, it supports, the golden thread and these kind of initiatives. We're also leaning heavy into the use of AI, not in the traditional sense of just a standard LLM, but we also utilize a RAG system. So, for example, when the contractors are submitting their RAMs to the system, the contractor has, before it comes to the principal contractor for a review period, they
Yeah.
have the opportunity to analyze their submitted RAMs against, the legislation of the UK, for example, and utilizing this RAG system, AI will detect gaps between what you've submitted and what the regulations require. And what that tends to do is tends to speed up the approval process because we're utilizing the AI to find the gaps. And when it actually gets to the final reviewer, yeah, of course, they're still making observations, but that whole process is much quicker, and we're also getting much higher quality risk assessments than what we were seeing previously, because AI is able to detect those errors or those missing gaps that are so important.
Dude, that's the key, man. I just wrote a couple of lines for Irish Magazine.
Mhm.
Bridget Leatherly, she wrote an article for Irish Magazine about AI. And one of the points that I was trying to make is I saw someone online saying, we can do your rounds for you in 30 seconds using
Uh,
AI. And it's like, you're missing the point. It's not about doing something in 30 seconds. A RAM is a process that
yep.
you go through, an evaluation of risk process.
Hmm.
The output is just a document, right? If you're
So
just talking about producing an output, you're missing the whole process. But what you're talking about, Chris, and anyone that knows me will know that I know an awful lot about this given my previous
sure.
role, right? Is that you're always talking about reviewing the RAMs against a body of information consolidated for a project to highlight to a contractor who might not know everything about that project to say, you need to think about X, Y, and Z. Maybe you didn't know about this.
Absolutely.
It's a different way of thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there are so many, on LinkedIn, there's a lot of people, proposing systems that are able to do it. And it's surprising how much traction and how much, feedback they get. Oh, this sounds great, this sounds phenomenal, but it's totally wrong. And when we were implementing AI, of course, that was an option to us. Hey, you can utilize AI based on a couple of prompts to write your risk assessment. Absolutely not. Never in this world will Nexus do that. It absolutely cannot. The entire premise and foundation of the health and safety profession is risk assessment, and you want to farm that out to AI. No, it would never happen. It cannot happen. It presents a huge amount of risk, um, in many factors, but primarily from a legal sense. I don't believe we've seen any cases that we can reference, any specific case law up to now, but I'm sure it's coming where, AI has written a risk assessment, it's been implemented, an incident has occurred, and all of a sudden, it turns out their entire system was written by AI and with no human input. And I know people are getting around this. They'll say, yeah, but after it's been done, it goes through a review process with a safety consultant. I just struggle to buy into it. I really do.
Well, there's also, I I had this argument with someone before, and they were saying, yeah, yeah, but who's accepting the responsibility? And it's like, yeah, but everything in law is all about a person. It's not about an AI. It's a person, competent person, responsible person, the PAP, principal accountable person in fire. It's all about a person, and an AI can't take that responsibility. So that whoever that person is taking a hell of a risk, and they're definitely not delegating their responsibility appropriately. Okay. So, I mean, we're happy with the limitations of AI. And I think there are an awful lot of limitations, but once you get over that, actually, it's a really phenomenally powerful tool. And one
Absolutely.
of the areas that I think it's really interesting in is in construction. And I actually had this conversation with Dominic Cooper a little while ago on LinkedIn. As organizations change, as hiring and firing staff becomes faster, which it has done,
Mm.
staff turnover has increased, churn rate has increased. If you look at construction projects now, actually the biggest tier one construction companies hardly employ anyone anymore. All of their contractors are outsourced, and there's constant churn. You know, that to me says that we have an issue where you're trying to improve the standards of behavior by training. And actually, to me, it's more about where did the last person leave off, and how can we pass that information on to the person taking over? And I feel like AI can really help there in terms of actually communicating that information more efficiently. But I probably haven't explained that quite well, but it's something that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the potential uses of AI are really unlimited. I think AI in its current form is exceptionally strong, and the user case is strong. I feel in another probably 3 years, which is a really short duration, I feel like the quality and the ability of AI will be far superior to even what we see now. I believe it will really have the ability to do things that we cannot even comprehend at this moment in time. And as AI really develops its capability, the impact that it will have overall on construction and every industry in reality will be exponential. But we have to be very, very cautious and careful, and as to how we utilize it. Because I think at the minute there are products out there that are utilizing AI technology that I don't believe really move the needle. And that's the important thing, because what we know is that fatality rates have plateaued. And if these new initiatives do not move the needle, then I don't believe that they should exist, because it's just more noise. What we do not need is noise. What we need is clarity and direction to
Yeah.
allow us to move the needle and send every single person home at the end of each working day. AI is never going to, unless you replace the human element completely, it's never going to eliminate risk to all persons. It won't. Risk will always be there. But what we have to focus on is the presence of adequate controls and the effectiveness of adequate controls. And there's energy based observations that's really just started to get a lot of traction. And I believe that this is where industry really needs to head. So it's about validating the effectiveness of controls opposed to trying to always eliminate risk entirely, which, don't get me wrong, I understand is absolutely what we should be striving for. But the reality is that's not always going to be possible. There's going to be limitations because work has to go on.
So is this similar to the stuff? Is this like the stuff that kills you,
Exactly.
sticky
Yeah.
energy based controls? And have you looked at the Construction Safety Research Alliance based out of Colorado, Matt Hallowell?
I haven't, no.
Be interesting to have a look because he's done an awful lot on this. I think he's wrote a book on it recently, and it is
Is this
interesting.
Matthew? I cannot remember his last name.
It is Hallowell, I think.
Yes, Matthew Halliwell. Yeah, this is the book that I was referencing. Yes, absolutely. It's actually on the
Yeah.
way to me from Amazon, so I'm really keen to give that a read. I think that'll be
Is
super
it
interesting.
I'm gonna find it now. Do you know what? We need a Jamie on this podcast. I don't know if you ever seen the old Joe Rogan clips where he's just like, Jamie, pull that up. CSRA. Let me find the CSRA. It's not even on there, is it? Construction Safety Research Alliance. I'd normally clean this stuff up, but I feel like we should leave it in so people know. Just looking at LinkedIn for all the connections. Do you know what? I'm not even connected with him. I don't think he's accepted my connection request, Chris. So
He
maybe I
should.
maybe I
He should.
shouldn't be promoting him on here.
There's a podcast available for him if he does.
I think that's where I think I've invited him on.
It would be a.
Oh no, he has connected with me. Matthew Hallowell. Why is he not down as working at CSRA then? That's
I think
weird.
he owns his own consultancy, right?
He's down as University of Colorado Boulder, but he's not down as working at CSRA. That's it. But it is Matthew Hallowell. I have
Yeah.
messaged him yet. He never messages me back. Dude, I've messaged this guy 3 times on, this is awkward now. I've messaged him on the 3 times
Both
and he's
times
just
it's gone.
ignored me. So yeah, mate, anyway, Chris, his stuff's rubbish. Don't read it. It's terrible. Honestly, you're not going to like it.
Yeah, I'll have to cancel that Amazon order. No, I
No,
mean,
but I do agree with you. I do agree with you, and I've seen it through Water in the UK as well,
mhm,
where they're really interested in this stuff. And one of the things that we were looking at is if you're managing a very large multi-site organization, right, and you start tracking control measures in risk assessments, like for example isolations, how did you identify those to a like a, I don't know, like a safety director who happens to be in South America or the Middle East or something, so that they actually know where in the world their high risk operations are? Because at the moment, what tends to happen is you'll take all the risk assessments into a system
mhm,
that the system treats them all as equal. Whereas AI can actually help you to identify factors in those
mhm,
completed risk assessments. So it's like, this is a high risk task because we've got isolations in place. There's a high energy issue, whether it be high voltage electricity, et cetera, et cetera.
mhm.
And that can really help you from a management angle.
Absolutely. So what Nexus actually does is, although it's when we create a new project, everything that local team is seeing is local and dedicated to their project. From a corporate perspective, so myself that has, these 15 projects, each time that I'm included as a user on that project, it creates a corporate dashboard for me. And what that corporate dashboard is doing is receiving and collating information from all of those 15 projects and creating an overall corporate dashboard for myself. And that tells me exactly which region of the world is causing us the most, let's say, friction at that moment in time, what particular challenges each of those projects is facing. A lot more information that's coming through based on risk type, risk categorization, high risk contractors, etc. But what this really allows me to do from a corporate perspective is to understand where to focus, which project needs my attention, where do I focus the limited resources that we have, and ultimately make more intelligent decisions. Because that's the visibility that I didn't have before. I would receive, those 15 PowerPoint or PDF reports at the end of the month, and I would spend the first 2 weeks of every month looking at what had happened and then really defining, okay, I need to travel here next or travel there next. But by the time I got to that project 6 weeks later, whatever issue I identified during my, let's say, trend analysis had already been resolved. I mean, it's construction, 6 weeks is a huge amount of time. So now that instant availability, those instant alerts as to when something happens allows me to be responsive in any given moment. And that visibility is so valuable to us. And again, being able to react in real time prevents so many issues, not only from a safety perspective, but also from a commercial perspective. And both are important. Whichever way you look at it, both are important. So, it's not only myself that has access to data and information, it's everybody in the business, it's every director who sits in the C suite. They're also seeing the same thing. Now, okay, they may be utilizing the data to make slightly different decisions, but the data is absolutely useful to everybody for a number of reasons.
Out of all of the things that you could develop, when you first came up with this idea, the very first thing you developed, what was the thing that you actually went, that is the key problem that we need to solve, and this is what we're developing first?
I mean, when we first launched, it was really just a case of collating observation data and
Yeah.
the general weekly report. So the general weekly report was really, number of contractors, manpower. It didn't really tell us a lot, but gave us a snapshot as to, what was happening on the project. Observation data was the first real thing that we were tracking that gave us real insight into understanding what particular element of this project do we need to focus on. Where is the majority of our risk coming from? And it allowed us to focus the resources there. And then as it went on, it became really important to understand from a documentation perspective before the work actually began. Have we analyzed this activity well enough? Have we planned this activity well enough? Have we considered all of the risks and hazards that our operatives are going to be exposed to during this activity? How are we approving them? How are we validating them? It all really came thick and fast. That's the truth. So while we started off with general reporting and observations, it very very quickly evolved into several more modules because the impression and the feedback that we got from clients and contractors was this is great, but if we're going to automate safety in construction, we need to automate the entire process because otherwise it's just going to feel fragmented. If we
Yeah.
only have one part of the process automated or within the system, but not the other 10, then it just won't work. So that's why we quickly, ended up developing and developing and developing and jumping onto these additional modules. And now we're finally at the point where we can say that every aspect of health and safety within construction can and is managed through Nexus.
Wow. How many projects operational on?
For myself, we have at the moment 15 active,
Yeah.
but within Nexus, of course, we have many more with various clients around the world. And
Wow.
then the feedback is great. It's a constant feedback loop. And I think this is one of the big changes or the big differences between Nexus and between some of these tier one operators. And don't get me wrong, there's many differences between them, and maybe I'll expand on that a little bit more. But the biggest one is that if somebody comes back to us with feedback saying this is not working, or it would be great if the system could do this, give me 3 days and it'll happen.
Yeah.
Because if it's beneficial to you, it's beneficial to me. And it's beneficial to every one of the clients who is facing the same challenge around the world. So thank you for identifying it. Let's go. And I think that's because before being a SaaS company owner, I'm a safety professional. So
Yeah.
safety is my absolute number one priority. And when I think this is what really differentiates Nexus as well. We are led by a safety professional. We are guided 100% by a safety team. This is what dictates what we do. Where does the platform head towards? And it's not decided by commercial teams that see a gap in the market
Yeah.
and want to just attack that particular revenue stream, because that has zero interest to me, to be honest. I mean, I've sat through some recent videos with some other providers where the owner of the company is on a podcast similar to this, and it's they admit I'm not a safety professional, I don't know, and in my mind I'm thinking, then why do you own a safety software company? I mean, you've just admitted that you know absolutely nothing about this industry. So what that tells me is that you see a significant financial reward and you're jumping on to this industry, but you don't really understand the industry. And if you don't understand it, you cannot create the best possible product. You just cannot.
Dude, I have this conversation all the time. I think I posted on LinkedIn the other day, and I said, look, one of the reasons why this industry is high trust is because if I sell HubSpot, in fact, I think I said nobody dies from buying HubSpot. I don't know if you saw the post. And this is why you can sell HubSpot as a SaaS person. That's fine because nobody dies, nothing goes wrong. You sign up to a subscription, you put your stuff in it, you like it, you like it, you don't. But this industry and safety is so high trust because if someone gets it wrong, there's every chance people are going to court because someone's died.
Hmm.
And I fear that there's a lot of people in the industry that haven't quite figured that out yet in terms of the sales and the SaaS side. We're seeing more and more safety products come through, but I don't think they've necessarily made the connection there. So they'll see things like events with an output, and that output is, well, how many sales do we get? They
Mhm.
don't see the events as you absolutely have to do these things to build up trust, because otherwise people don't know you. And if they don't
Mhm.
know you or can't talk to you, they're not going to trust you with other people's lives, because that's what we're talking about. And it sounds quite dramatic, but it's totally different to any other industry.
It absolutely is. It really is, and it's 100% correct what you're saying, Pete. Totally agree.
Okay. So if a company comes to you now, what is your typical ideal buyer? Who is your typical ideal client? I'm really interested in that sort of commercial element, and how do they actually implement this within an organization or within a project?
So, I mean, the who is very simple. It's anybody who is acting as the principal contractor or the general contractor on any construction project. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for, a house builder, not unless you have 600 houses that you're building. So I really don't recommend it to everybody. But, if you are a principal contractor responsible for a fairly comprehensive project, then that's the who. This is designed specifically for you. One of the things that we were very, very cautious of when we designed Nexus was ease of implementation. I spoke with so many providers who needed a 2 or 3 week onboarding process, and it was really complex. And again, this goes back to wanting to embed in every element of your organization. Nexus is not
Dude,
like,
2 or 3 weeks though is quick, man. I remember implementing software in real estate, and 18 months later, it's still not done.
I mean,
And
that's
you think about that for temporary works or something, or imagine if you've got fit out teams or something like that, fitting something out. By the time the software's in, they've left, they're done. They'll have
absolutely.
that fitted out within a few nights in London. It's like,
Absolutely. It's
yeah,
painful, and it's an extremely expensive process in many cases. And I
yeah, because
understand
often
the
you're
resistance.
paying for the software subscriptions at the same time that they're doing the onboarding.
Absolutely. And I totally understand the resistance from many organizations. So when we were building Nexus, I said, okay, I want to be able to implement Nexus in any project in under 10 minutes. And we can do that. If
Wow.
I received a phone call and somebody said, okay, I want to move forward, here's my email address, here's the name of my project. Within 10 minutes, you get an email saying, welcome to Nexus. Click here. Here's your email and password to log in. You log in, it takes you straight to the administration panel, and then you just input in the parameters of your project. So the location, what's the name of your contractors, what's the areas on your project, who do you want to invite, sorry, who's your users, and that's it. If you've added that basic information, your project is live. It exists. It's ready to go. So there is no lengthy onboarding process. There's nothing complicated about it at all. It's super intuitive, and then obviously it becomes data rich the more and more that you utilize it and start engaging with the system. But it's not something that requires a significant amount of effort. One of the things we were very, very clear on is that the system must work for the project. Project must not work for the system. So, inputting information is just whenever you see an observation or you complete a safety conversation or you're making an energy based observation. Okay, yes, it requires a weekly report to keep the information, updated and live, but we're also utilizing and leveraging a lot of technology. So, for example, we have live weather data and we also have
Yep.
a live project schedule. So within any construction project, I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit off piste here, Pete.
That's fine.
You tend to have these P6 programs or schedules that say, during the course of this project, we need to complete these 3,000 activities. But it's not a single source of truth. It doesn't tell me what's happening today. So what we have in our system is a live schedule that will list every activity that's going on today. And it's also risk based. So attached to each one of those lines tells us what's the level of risk associated with that activity, and it will rank it by risk. So it's a risk intensity scaled live schedule. What's also happening in the background is we're receiving live weather reports every 1 hour, which is then searching for conflicts and is providing feedback to that construction team saying, hey, I've noticed that you've got a lifting operation ongoing between, 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. today. Weather is saying you've got 55 mile per hour gusts. Alert. Check that activity is probably not going to happen. So it's a real intelligence led platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then pricing wise, can I ask, how do you price it? I mean, do you price it per project, or is it
Project.
per user, or is it per contractor?
No, per project. We price it based on the size of your project. So if you're going to have a project with a total manpower of 500 persons, it's price X. If you have between 500 and 1,000, if you have between 1,000 and 2,000, so it's tiered in that respect, but it's not per user, because when you start pricing your models per user, you in the end will limit the amount of interactions with your system, because
Yeah.
companies will not pay for every worker on that construction project to have access to your platform. They just will not.
Yeah, and then you also get like a general at whatever company, and then everyone tries to use that, and it gets quite difficult.
Sure. The other thing that we focused on commercially was, and this is one of the things that I really hated when I went through the sales pitches of these other organizations, is everything is sold modular. And I just think we are managing health and safety. We are protecting people. I will not break this down into modular sections to try and upsell that. When you purchase Nexus, you have access to absolutely everything. The only time the price changes is based on the scale of your project. Once you're inside Nexus, there is no limitations whatsoever. There's no locked
Yeah.
features.
Mate, I love that. Again, it's the nuance of it and the context changes when it's safety, isn't it? Like when you buy a CRM or you buy another piece. So like I'm recording this on Riverside, right? And it's like, oh, if I want my little logo in the corner, it'll cost a bit more money. I get that. But with safety, it's like, oh, you want to save some people's lives? You've got to pay an extra £5 per whatever per month. And
Yeah,
then that will save someone else's life. It's like, come on.
yeah,
Like that's just the baseline. But
absolutely,
it shouldn't. Yeah, it totally makes sense. The culture around selling software isn't necessarily congruent with what we're trying to do in safety. It's a
absolutely.
different market.
And this is the again the difference between a company that's owned by a safety professional that is genuinely trying to move the needle and support industry, and organizations that are simply identifying a a profit, that they see a financial reward is possible, a financial gain. Which, don't get me wrong, I understand the commercial aspect. Every company has to make money, but I will not open a company in an industry such as, in a profession such as health and safety, if I did not understand it, because you are literally playing with lives. The results of when safety goes wrong, they're not positive. No, and it's not like when you're on your computer and you make an error and you press backspace. That's not possible in the real world. In safety, it's not. There is no back button, and lives are lost if we do not get this right.
Yeah, agreed. And another thing that I find really interesting about what you're doing with Nexus is what a lot of founders do is they'll build in one country, right? So they'll build a product in the UK. They will try and sell into a certain industry in the UK. That's their vertical. And then they'll expand sideways into other verticals. And then eventually they'll make a geographic leap, right? And the big one is obviously the US. And
Mhm.
you know, it's been said many times that the US is a graveyard of software companies that didn't quite make it. Whereas
Mhm.
you're not geographically constrained. You're selling to people all around the world and your product is used all around the world
Mhm.
from the outset, like simply because of what you do and how you've positioned it.
Yeah, I think it's the way that we design Nexus. Again, we were very conscious of that. And I think it goes back to the type of platform that we are. So traditional platforms, and many of the platforms out there, they tend to be compliance led. And when you
Yeah.
are a compliance led platform, you need to be compliant against a particular set of standards. So, if you say I need to be compliant against UK standards, then you're going to build your platform to be 100% sort of aligned with those UK regulations and standards. I'm not interested in compliance, so to speak. I'm interested in intelligence. I want to know where to focus. I want to know exactly what to do to move the needle. I'm not necessarily interested in compliance. Compliance is a part of it for sure, but it's not the end goal of Nexus. The end goal of Nexus is to understand where is our point of highest risk at any given moment of the day, of the week, of the year in which we need to focus our efforts to make sure that nobody gets hurt in that location. That's
Yeah.
in essence what we're trying to do.
Moving on to the next section. If we're going to share some lessons for the safety community, if I'm a safety professional or if there are safety professionals out there that know very little about technology, where do they start? If I'm a head of safety and the remit's come down, I need to digitize safety and do some more with, say, AI. Where would you even start to look at that in most organizations?
Well, that's a great question. I think in reality, you don't start off by looking at the technology. I think you have to start off by identifying the problem. What is it that you're specifically being asked to fix? What's the challenge that you have? Without an understanding of the actual problem, it's impossible to understand where you need to look. Because trying to if you go to market or you go to the World Wide Web and you just search for, AI, you will be inundated with solutions, but solutions to
Solutions
what
to
problem?
problems that you didn't even know that you had.
Exactly. And you will just end up saying, okay, we need to do this and this and this and this and this. When the reality is, if 10 things in your organization are absolutely fine, it's this one thing that we're struggling with. Okay, then attack that problem. But if you don't understand the problem, you cannot pinpoint the solution that you need.
Yeah. Founders that are building safety tech, what do you think they get wrong when they're trying to sell their technology to safety professionals?
I think they overpromise, or perhaps they misunderstand the market's needs. And I think again, this goes back to the three types of platforms. You have compliance platforms, you have efficiency platforms, and you have intelligence platforms. If you and compliance platforms, really, this is what existed for the past 20 years, right? It's just it captures the amount of data and it tells you, on a scale of 0 to 100, how compliant are you? But in reality, it doesn't tell you anything. Efficiency is literally just doing the same but faster. So, instead of me having to manually input into a register the information on a particular substance, I'm just going to import the PDF of the safety data sheet and it will extract the information for me. Or you have intelligence, which is absorbing all the information that you're giving it and providing outputs as to where to focus. So I think you have to, as founders, you have to really understand the needs of the industry and make sure that you are providing actual solutions based on real needs. I don't know if I've answered that question really.
No, you have. I've never heard of it talked about in that way in terms of the three types of platform. That segmentation is really interesting. And again, I did write something about this recently where I think it goes right is where founders have a problem that they're trying to solve. They do that, they get some traction. It's gone well because they know it's a problem.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, even if they're not safety, they've still got a background in something. So they've worked in construction, they've worked as an engineer, they understand and they've identified a problem, they fix that problem.
Yeah.
Then they start getting creative and then they start creating solutions that are cool based on the technology that they've seen for problems that don't necessarily exist,
Yes.
rather than just wringing out all they can out of the original problem.
Hmm.
They start trying to apply the problems to other industries. So, well, if that works for construction, it worked for FN. If it works for FN, it'll work for hospitality. And then it gets weaker and weaker. It's diluted and the message is diluted the further you get away from the original problem you were solving.
Yep.
Yeah, mate, I like it. Where do you think safety tech is going to go over the next 3 to 5 years?
Great question. I see a lot of wearable technology coming through.
Yep.
I'm not sure if that's more of a gimmick, to be honest, than something that can that really can support in the real world. I think AI will become smarter, which will aid better decision making in terms of the output based on all the received input data. And so I think it will certainly improve in terms of quality of feedback. Wearable tech, and when you see these AI models interacting with sort of camera technology, where they're trying to find it in real time non-conformances. For me, that feels very gimmicky. It's not something that I can buy into. Wearable tech, especially around the topic of heat stress, for example, that is something that's extremely close to my heart because I work in various locations where we're dealing with 45 to 55 Celsius per day. So heat stress is an active risk that we're dealing with, and a lot of these products that claim to be able to identify changes in core body temperature, for example. I don't believe in that kind of technology yet. I've never seen it really validated. I think there's a lack of understanding around how the body actually responds to thermoregulation, or how the process of thermoregulation actually works. And that doesn't really correspond to how this new safety tech is working. Geospatial technology, geolocation technology is one that's often touted with many providers. Great in theory, not very good in practice. Because if you have 5,000 workers on site and one of them decides that they're not going to allow you to track them through their own personal cellular phone, then your entire technology stack does not work. It's failed because you only need one person. And of course, in a construction environment where you've got transient workers and you're all of a sudden saying as a project, hey, you all need to let us track you every time you're on this project, you're never going to get that buy-in. It just will not happen. So there's certain technologies that, while available now, I don't think will take off. I think that people will trial them because they sound exciting. But once they actually utilize them and realize that actually that doesn't really work, I think they will just drop off. And yeah, I believe the future of tech is just better intelligence. I don't necessarily think it's more products. I think it's just improved intelligence.
I've actually really thought about this intelligence layer a lot, and that we don't seem to have great data in safety. Even when we look at like the HSE's data, it's very, I would say, superficial.
It is.
Even when you look at the accident data, the ill health data, the ill health report went out recently. I mean, you've done occupational health masters, but I remember reading it and it was like, these are assumed figures, and everything was an assumed figure. In a short report, it mentioned assumed like 12 times or something. And I was like, how do we not know?
Yeah.
Like, how do we not know? And I know we could get to a big conversation on data, but I feel like even when it comes down to the fatal accident data for occupational fatalities in the UK, we look at them this year, was it 125, the lowest it's been ever? But I still don't know how the accidents happened, and I still can't find out any more information about them. It'll go 35% are from falls from height, and you're like, okay, but is it off a ladder, single story, new, scaffolding, we're carrying something? Was it cleaning Blackpool tap? I mean, what give me something that I can actually implement on my side to prevent this. Otherwise, I'm just chasing a shadow and I'm having to do everything. What would solve it? Is it more toolbox talks? Is it fall arrest? Is it like, what do I do with that information? And it's something that I'm very passionate about, is about the data. And it's not there. And I feel that this is a huge industry-wide challenge, because without a really good pot of data to benchmark against, every individual organization is going to be collating their own data, but it's so narrow and limited that until we actually sort out a standardized taxonomy and then integrate these systems, we're just not going to have enough information to make a real difference.
I
And
couldn't
that's,
agree more. I think you're absolutely nail on the head. And what we do in Nexus is we really delve into the data to a really granular level that, the input of an observation or an inspection or a safety conversation or an energy-based observation is just the very, very starting point of the analytical process. And the output is what must drive change. It must modify your behavior and it must modify essentially your working day. Because otherwise it just becomes stagnant data. And we made that error when we first built Nexus. Really, all we were doing is capturing data. And it was actually my engineering team that came forward and said, okay, but what does it tell me? What's the output? Where do I need to focus? What do I need to do? And that's when we realized that actually we need to be far more analytical. And I feel that that's probably where the majority of the industry is at. We're collecting a lot of data, but what are we doing with the data? Is it driving a decision? And I don't believe in the majority of cases that it is.
Yeah. Chris, honestly, I really appreciate your time. And
Right.
if anyone's listening to this and they're interested in Nexus, where do they go to find out more?
Sure. So you can reach out to us at nexussafetysolutions.com, or you can personally reach out to myself. We also have a consultancy company called Transatlantic Safety. So there are various ways of reaching out. Also via LinkedIn to myself directly is probably the easiest way of reaching out to me. But yeah, several ways, easily contactable.
I'll put the links to everything in the show notes on the podcast. So it'll all go out. It'll all be in the description at the bottom.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Pete. It was an absolute pleasure.